So I believe it's no secret that the most successful type of candidate these days is the internal candidate. And in this, I'm going to talk about what can you do to maybe try to differentiate yourself in these job interviews and pass them, essentially. And the first thing I'll talk about here would be the classic story bank approach, right? So given the fact that not many people can end up with a proper story bank, I believe that the simple fact that you can and you can improve your story bank is something which could make a significant difference here. Because the giving answers versus preparing stories, the story approach is more qualitative. I've been talking about this at length. I won't insist. However, if you want to get one step further of this preparing your story bank, you could even consider sharing your story bank with your interviewers in advance. This is something internal candidates don't do. I mean, it's something relatively new. If you want to try it out, there's also an option for you to differentiate yourself from other candidates, right? The second thing I like to talk about here would be risk. Okay, so there's a tendency, the more you prepare or when you feel yourself in a position of strength to pass a job interview, you are less likely to take risk. All right. So if you think that or you are comfortable taking risk, you could also consider this approach. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, you should also weigh in the risk of monumental mistakes, because people who tend to give answers on the spot, who do not take their time to answer a question, are also more likely to make mistakes. However, if you feel yourself super confident about your experiences, about talking about your experience, about answering a question, if you look at politicians, how quickly they answer those questions, if you feel comfortable taking this risk, then answering questions as quickly as possible could be also something to take in mind. Or another way you could consider going about more risk-taking approach would be to sometimes addressing the elephant in the room, right? Sometimes there's something in the job description you're not qualified for, which they consider as key, right? Which you could be upfront about, right? They don't have to ask you about this, but you simply pitch it on the first occasion. Like, yes, I really do understand your concern that this type of experience is not something I'm particularly familiar with. However, and you pitch it with your strength, or you make a stark contrast, and basically you convince them that you are the right person for the job. So in most cases, there is an elephant in the room, which most candidates will avoid talking about. If you have such an elephant in the room, if you have such a point that is difficult to talk about, you should consider talking about it up front, right? And again, it's dangerous, it's counterintuitive advice, but sometimes it works if you feel comfortable taking risk, right? And the final way, the third thing about risk, like talk about here, would be to dramatize, to overly dramatize your answers. And if you look at all the best speakers, or again, at politicians, if you want, you will see that by dramatizing their answers, by introducing some drama in there, they make more answers more convincing and more memorable. Again, there are chances you won't put together a great show here if you don't know what you're doing, but still it's a risk which is worth considering to the extent you feel like you want to differentiate, or you feel the need to take on more risk for your job interview. And the third thing I like to talk about here when it comes to differentiate from internal candidates is that what's your superpower? Okay, so some candidates do have one thing which they're extraordinarily good at, right? And basically your strength, right? And basically by selling yourself on that strength over and over and over again, you will be perceived that exponentially better than other candidates, right? So maybe the type of experience you have makes you more unique for the job. Maybe you're going for maybe a combination of running your own startup, both running your startup and working in corporate. is something that gives you a unique perspective for the role that you're applying for. This could make a huge difference for certain types of roles, or in other types of more technical roles. You could say, hey, I have sales experience. And if, technical roles these days in high-performing companies can easily be commercial. I mean, you must show commercialism, and commercialism is what sells the best candidates there. So these type of things, if you have them, don't just ensure they hear them once, but rather over-communicate on your superpower, right? Because you want to gain that exponential benefit from your strength, right? Last but not least, as a closing note here, focus on putting together a great show. Even if the role was already promised in advance and all that stuff, even if that happens, exceptional candidates, like if you make an exceptional performance during a job interview, they will call you back, even if not for the role that you're applying for, but they will call you back eventually in a number of weeks or even months to apply for a different role, because high-performing companies will always value talent. Right, so to the extent you can put together a great show and convince them you're an extraordinarily qualified candidate who they really want to work with, that's when you have the best possible outcome. So hopefully this was useful, and thank you very much for watching.